Hey everybody, welcome to DCC College. I am Hector Cruz and I'm so ecstatic to be here hosting and to have these lovely judges with me. But let's start by introducing them. So I'm going to start with Judge Marc. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Marc Plourde. I have been gaming for like 25 years or something. I came to DCC about 4 or 5 years ago. Fell in love with it. Fell in love with MCC, co-host of Glowburn through this year anyway. Yeah, that's about that, I think.
Awesome. And going off of that, let's go with Judge Forrest.
I'm Forrest Aguirre, been gaming since 1979. I'm that old. Playing DCC, I can't remember how long now. And MCC, of course, helped found the Glowburn podcast, hosted with Marc for a while there. And yeah, I guess that's all you need to know right now.
All right. And from there, let's go to Judge Joan.
Hi, I'm Judge Joan of Arc, Destroyer, and I started RPG gaming when I was 50 years old, so I'm not going to even tell you when that was. And I began Dungeon Crawl Classics in 2016, and I hated it. And now I am the host of Order of Shanna podcast. And you can find that on iTunes, and which then leads you, I mean, you can find it on any podcast app at this point. So
Look at you. You're like a pro. You're like already selling your product already.
Hey, what do you know? I'm selling DCC, kiddo.
That's right. That's right. First one's free. Okay. And from there, let's go with Judge Dan.
Hey there. I'm Dan Steeby, hailing from Olympia, Washington. I am the author of the Bronx Beasts zine, which is DCC with a little Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tossed into the mix. So if you need some ninja beat 'em ups with a raccoon involved, that's where you go to. So I discovered DCC, I think, in 2015 and really haven't looked back. Hail from the Metzner Red Box era of 83 or so, when I was a tender age of 8, are my creds there. So
Awesome. And last but very not least, the wonderful Judge Jeff.
Hello. Yes, I've been playing Dungeon Crawl Classics since 1964, part of the old guard. And I am on 2 podcasts, one called Spellburn, which is about Dungeon Crawl Classics, and another one called the Appendix N Book Club, which is about the literary roots of D&D. And one thing that I was thinking is, I feel like I want to call this DCC Community College instead of DCC College. That way it can be DCCCC.
versus the university. Yeah.
Yeah,
got it.
DCCCCC.
I like
CCC?
that. I think we should write Joseph a letter. I dig that. So so welcome to DCCCC, Community College. So here in the next hour or so, you're going to hear some great tips, judging type of advice and all that great stuff. I'll give you a little brief history about me. I've role played here and there. I probably played more video game RPGs in the last 10 years more than anything. Around 2015, I discovered DCC and fell in love with it. And I never really ran anything. I've always been a player. And DCC completely just enamored me. And I started running, kind of like Joan. I started running stuff from DCC on. So that's a little bit about me.
Sounds like 2015 was a good year for many of us. That's interesting.
Yeah. So going on that, I'm going to throw out the first question. And please, if you have any questions, throw them out in chat and we will do our best to answer them.
We're all ears.
Yeah. We're all, oh my God. I need my drum set.
Sorry.
Where's my drum set? Okay, so what modules are good for beginning judges? Let's start with Judge Jeff.
Modules that are good for beginning judges. Well, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking to have your hand held through it, then I think certainly, the Sailors on the Starless Sea is a fantastic introduction. I also really love just kind of like the very kind of like loosely written modules.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if you're a beginning judge who just wants to like go ahead and just like dive into something, there are these really fun 0 level funnels called the Meat Grinder and the Meat Grinder 2, TOO, that I'm sure if you just Google Meat Grinder DCC RPG, like the PDF will just pop right up. Those are so fun. They're very kind of like loosely written, but they're like metal AF and just a really good time. So that's the one I would recommend.
That's awesome. Good answer. How about you, Judge Dan?
I think I'm going to plug Blood for the Serpent King, which I think is a con game for like second level characters. So it allows players, I think, to, actually see what the classes do without them being, minimal, I guess, a step above the minimal, which is pretty badass for DCC, of course. And there's a lot of, I don't want to give anything away. There's a lot of snakes. Giveaway. Serpent King, maybe there's a snake or two involved, perhaps, but I love fighting snakes and riding on snakes, whatever you do with snakes. And there's a lot of the DCC wonkiness where like there are weird things going on that could totally make or destroy you, with a random yes/no decision. So I always appreciate that. So.
Excellent. And let's go with Judge Marc. What do you think?
Well, I'm not going to say a funnel. Because I actually think that a funnel takes a little bit more effort on the part of the judge than a regular game does. You're expected to have a body count to whittle things down to the end, and that is not always easy to do as a judge. I actually really, really love the sort of very self-contained, the jeweler who dealt in Stardust. I think it is it's the motivation is clear. It is a heist story. You're trying to break in and get as much loot as you can and get out safely. I think that it is a really well-designed series of, floors in this building rather than it being a dungeon. So there's a little bit of difference from, maybe the stock standard fantasy fare. And I think just in terms of the quality of the writing, like Harley knocked that one out of the park, and it's just a dang good adventure.
Good answer. Great answer. And what about you, Judge Joan?
Well, my first thought was Portal Under the Stars. It is the funnel that is included in the DCC book. Core book, and then, but I would follow that up with either Starless Sea, and then Harley's one, and Doom of the Savage Kings. I think I remember them when I first started playing. That's pretty much what I cut my teeth on. So it went from the funnel. Portal Into the Stars to Sailors on the Starless Sea and Doom of the Savage Kings. I mean, I just totally remember what my character did in Doom of the Savage Kings. And from then on, though, it's been kind of hazy as to that. But yeah, it just really was a mark that, set me into Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Awesome. And what about you, Judge Forrest?
So I guess I'll be the third person to say Sailors has to be there as one. That's just a classic. The first one I ran was One Who Watches From Below, Joe Bittman's module, and it actually was pretty darn user friendly, I thought. I would say if you have experience running other games, the Metal Gods of Ur-Haddad, I think it was issue 2, had a heist generator. That is amazing. If you're ready to run on the fly, if you're experienced enough to do that, that's a really good one. to throw out there. And then I would be remiss if I didn't self-promote a little bit. There is a funnel that I wrote, Beyond the Silver Screen, which was designed to introduce people to DCC and to start a campaign. Or you could do it self-contained as well. But that was my whole intent in writing that, was to give people an inroad, an easy inroad. So your mileage may vary, but.
And if you love that like Dungeons and Dragons cartoon style of like thrown into the like the D&D world from our like kind of,
and many of us do.
Yeah, absolutely. Beyond the Silver Screen is the way to do that.
Absolutely. And funny that you say that, because that's going to be my answer.
Thanks.
That was my very first adventure from DCC. I didn't know what DCC was. And I saw your adventure had a review. And I was like, this sounds really freaking cool. You're a teenager, you're going to like a movie theater, all stuff happens. So I bought it, I read through it, loved it. And then I looked up what DCC was.
Nice.
So I got to thank you, Forrest. You're really the one that introduced me to a DCC. So that's definitely my answer.
You're too kind. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm
my
not just
players
saying that.
enjoyed that one also.
Oh,
My
yeah,
players
that's a
just
classic.
had a blast with that one.
Yeah. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, but what you did like towards the end, like it was brilliant. It's just
Now I will say one caveat to go with that though is there is a section that you need to study out that is a little bit difficult to run because it deals with time, and so that can be tricky. So if you're a beginning DM, you may want to modify that, or beginning judge, you may just want to modify that, or keep very careful track. So
yeah, I have to admit I did have to sort of like shortcut a couple of things through it, but it still worked though, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
It was really cool. Nice. Okay, next question is what media would you like to stat for DCC? And if you have, what have you used? Let's start with Judge Marc.
God, I feel like I could just go to the Glowblog and pull up half of the things I did for Glowburn as a cheat sheet.
True.
You know, one of the things that I really love in media is time travel stories, and I have been knocking around in my head a game where all of the like a funnel game where all the players are the same character at different incarnations of their life, timeline. But it's hard to break down such that you don't just end up with like a paradox that wipes out half the table in the first combat or something. So I would love to do something with time travel in DCC. Second place behind that would be Mecha. I just think it would be really cool to have like a DCC version of like Pacific Rim.
Awesome.
Nice.
Cool answer. What about you, Judge Dan?
Oh gosh. I'm gonna go for the 1995 version of the Island of Dr. Moreau. Yeah. So, love me some Richard Stanley. It's a fantastic classic fantasy novel, of course, as well. And there's 3 different movies to watch to mine material for. Richard Stanley version being the most weird and most appropriate to DCC then. So yeah.
Very cool. What about you, Judge Forrest?
So one of my favorite movies of all time is Heavy Metal.
Ooh.
And absolutely, you could run an entire campaign just on the different segments of that movie. And in fact, for Glowburn, one time I did a statted out one of the weapons that shows up on there, which was kind of fun. Another movie that I really love is Blade Runner, and I would love to see somebody take a noir, kind of a sci-fi noir, not cyberpunk, but a sci-fi noir shading of DCC at some point. I think you'd have to. It's going to be heavy on the atmosphere, obviously, and I don't know, mechanically it may not change anything, but I think that could be a lot of fun if done right.
That's awesome. Good answer. And what about you, Judge Jeff?
I guess I would want to see John Carpenter crawl classics. Like a full-on Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New
Escape from
York.
New York,
Thing.
yes.
Like I want to see some kind of like super like 80s John Carpenter little third-party product that just kind of like makes that possible. Like that sounds really fun, and I would absolutely love to play in that.
That's cool. And what about you, Judge Joan?
Well, this would be 80s, definitely. But one of the movie series I like is Back to the Future. So, setting up the DeLorean, setting up the, in the third one, the steam engine, setting up, McFly and all, those kind of things. Maybe in the first Back to the Future, setting up what kind of damage the manure does for, when the gang flies into that.
Personality damage.
Yeah. And how much drinking a tab would of personality would you get? Order a tab or
Yeah, they're canceling tab.
Yeah. I just saw that. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, crazy.
Yeah,
As of this week, it's being they've announced that they're discontinuing tab.
Horde now.
I didn't know it was still around.
I didn't realize it was either.
And that's why.
Yeah. Bye-bye,
Touche.
tab. We can't really get Dr. Pepper around here either, or Diet Dr. Pepper around here either. It's like, where'd it go?
Nice. Excellent. Okay. I know if I was going to stat something, I'm going to go again to video games, because that was kind of my go-to for RPGs, in the 90s and early 2000s. There's so many, especially the way video games are now. You can really riff a lot, and it doesn't have to be RPG necessarily. It could be space horror. It could be zombie. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. And now, and going off of what Forrest was saying, Cyberpunk, even though you didn't really say that per se, but there's a new Cyberpunk game coming out. Lots of stuff you could do. So that's kind of my go-to for that. Excellent. Okay, so going back to what Marc was saying about the, how tough it is for new judges to run funnels. What tips do you have for streamlining funnel encounters or long fights in general? And let's go with Judge Marc.
So when I run funnels, I only let one of the 0 levels from each player do an action. That way, instead of having 3 or 4 actions to resolve for each player, it's one at a time. It makes the whole table go round faster. I think that's really important. I do all of my attacks random by player, and then random within their group. And so they're whether it's on their sheet, and I'll say the upper left-hand corner, they're getting attacked, or the third one back if I'm using the little individual seats, and I'll have them line them up in their marching order. I try to think about the stuff that I do when I'm trying to protect a 0, and make sure that 0 is going to die when I'm running the game. But I think the big thing is if you've got 4 characters per player, and you get into combat, you really got to say only one of your characters can act in a round, and that just facilitates things going around faster. Otherwise it's just ridiculous how bogged down it can get.
Yep, that actually happened to me when I first ran Beyond the Silver Screen, because I didn't really realize then. Yeah, the combat took a little bit of time. So great answer though. What about you, Judge Joan? What do you do?
For running the funnels,
Yep, long combats.
Yeah, long combats. I try to pay attention to the this is okay. Well, how do I want to say this? I have some player. You can have some players that are that dominate at the table, and so it's letting the if it's in a funnel, long combats. I usually will just go around the table using a very quick way of initiative. And do the highest initiative, and then whoever's got the highest initiative on left or right, and then just go around a circle versus trying to follow the initiative order of each player. They'll roll only once for all of their characters, and then I try not to let them use all of their characters at once. And just keep moving around the table for them to decide, they get to use one, then the next person gets to use one. And then if they don't want to use all of them in a combat, which is probably the safest way, we all know that, is not to throw them all in the room together. And try to move it that way. And it feels like it moves quicker. I don't know whether it really does, but it does feel like it moves quicker.
Nice. Good answer. And how about you, Judge Dan?
I guess my thought is that if you're spending a long time in a combat, you're probably doing something wrong in DCC. So if it starts to feel like you're in a 4th edition game or something, like no, it's something like stop that. A lot of the time, combats usually won't stretch for more than 4 or 5 rounds, really, because it's that deadly, or you're going to run by then, one or the other, is my take. And I guess, I sound sinister by saying this, but I suppose that, even that carries over to funnels. I like to give the players a chance to do everything with each character, but a lot of players will have 1 or 2 characters that they'll hold in reserve for that, those first initial incidents, I would say. But then, in those funnels, just kill them fast and hard. And that way you don't have that many players, your characters to deal with, and the players are then only, dealing with 1 or 2 characters. And they usually hold them a little closer to the chest then too, when they're, they've been whittled down a bit too. So there's a little caution exercise at some point.
Absolutely. Nice. And what about you, Judge Jeff?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Dan and Joan about coming up with with Marc and Joan, with coming up with a really kind of fast, speedy initiative system. Just have everybody roll, and whoever gets the highest, they go first, and you just go around. Especially if you're dealing with a funnel, or if it's like a con game, like let's just keep it moving. Another thing that I really like is invest in these little sand timers here.
Yeah.
Almost no money at all. And when somebody is having a hard time making a decision, you just put this in front of them, and someone's like, okay. So does a really good job of kind of like amping up the like, it shows you that there's stakes. And also, like, if you find that, like, especially if you've got a new player who doesn't really know exactly what they should do, and they're kind of looking around and they're like, oh, guys, should my characters go over here? Should they go over there? I'll just be like, hey, actually, don't worry about what they think. Just go ahead and, like, all this is happening super, super fast. Just let me know what you think your character would do right now. And, like, I really pull their attention on me, because when they're looking all around, that's when they can get real kind of scattered. And I'm just like, come right back to me, right here. Talk to me. What is your character doing?
I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I especially love the little timer. That's great.
Yeah.
What about you, Judge
Keeping the
Forrest?
focus on you as the GM is actually, that's a really good technique as well, because it keeps it, not only does it keep them focused on you, but it keeps them focused on the story instead of whatever goofy joke or that.
The metagaming or whatever.
Yeah. Great point. What about you, Judge Forrest?
So I'll go one step more extreme. I use this guy, and I set a timer.
Yeah.
That has an obnoxious alarm, and so it's like, you got 20 seconds, go. I'll also say it's different to me if you've got all of the, if everybody has 4 characters at one point. I will have people. This is going to sound blasphemy. I will have people roll a group initiative. One person rolls for the whole group rather than each individual. later on, I think you can break it down by player when you're like, to Dan's point, when you've skewed things down a little bit.
Yep.
you've knocked off a few. Another thing I think is important in that is I before the game even starts, I like to have my players rank their characters according to their agility, so that we know who's going first. Your character with the highest agility of your 4 goes first, and the rest follow in suit. Then you can follow Joan's suggestion, which I love. You go one way for your first character, go back the second way for the second character. By that point, everybody else is dead, so it doesn't matter.
You're dead. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, those are really awesome answers. Yeah, I know I've stealed a little bit from each of those. I know for funnels, I've done the thing where I'll only let one character fight instead of all 4 of them. When it's been like a longer combat, because I've noticed in higher level DCC games, it's a bit more mathy, so sometimes things can get a little sloggy. I've tried a couple of things. Like sometimes I will do a fresh initiative at the top of every round using like a D10. I don't know if it makes it go faster, but at least there's more interest where, okay, now the baddie's going first, where the last round it was last. So it kind of keeps some of that action going.
And it makes it more dynamic because you
It
don't
does,
know
absolutely.
if you might have a chance you might go last in one round and then immediately after is first in the following round. So there's, it sets up some interesting maneuvers. I got 2 other things I want to say. One is if you've got a bad guy with multiple action dice, I actually roll initiative for each action die. So they don't just drop a ton of attacks all on one turn. They space them out throughout the combat.
Wow.
And then as far as funnels go, and I'm going to give a shout out to my buddy Jim Walls. Don't be afraid of wholesale manslaughter. He was running a funnel game at Gen Con a few years back, realized that he had given out too many zeros to us. And in a single encounter wiped out 1/4 of all of our zeros. And it was basically just, flat out manslaughter. And it was great because it also put us into the mindset of, oh, these are disposable characters.
And that's the thing. It seems like some people they guard their characters so much. It's like, no, this is a funnel, man. Like it's a meat grinder.
I tell them right up front they should name them things like meat puppet and corpse sickle, and just to get them used to that fact. Don't give them names. It's like your pet. Don't
like the occupation's
the animals on the farm. Don't give them a name.
Yeah, especially for a beginning judge, I could see that, it helps the players, not get so attached to it. So it looks like we got a question from chat. So let's see here. I have a lot of new players coming from other games who want to backstab all the time as thieves. I really think that they have to hide to do it. What kind of fiction can I point to explain let me say that again. What kind of fiction can I point to explain to it can explain it to them better? Especially Appendix N. And let's go with, how about Judge Jeff?
Sure. So, obviously, the first thing I think of is Fafford and Grey Mouser. But I would say in general, when it comes to like using the Appendix N I wouldn't use the Appendix N to justify rules decisions. I feel like you go to the Appendix N for flavor, go to the Appendix N for set pieces and for cool items you want to steal and like silly villains and things like that. That's like why the Appendix N is amazing. I feel like if you feel strongly that thieves need to pass a hide check prior to doing a backstab, then awesome, you're the judge. Say that and move on. Like it's now so you have decreed it. But if you're a judge who doesn't feel that way, then that's also cool. But like we make the declaration and we move on.
I like that. And that actually reminds me of something that I love about DCC. The judge is always right. Which I love. And but like Jeff said, you can go either way, it doesn't really matter. How about you, Judge Marc?
So I think that with regards to the fiction, you need to think about this. What is actually the story that you're telling at the table? What is happening? Did that player make a backstab and then stand there and then try to make another backstab the following round? No, that doesn't work. Did he make a backstab on target A, use his move action and specifically say that he was breaking away and sneaking around back behind guy C to set up a backstab the following round? If so, and he makes that sneak roll, yeah, sure, he can backstab every round if he's moving around the combat using the distractions of the action of the other players and the enemies to obfuscate his maneuvers and set him up for that backstab. If he's putting in the effort, I will reward him with the backstab. But if he's just standing there, I want a backstab, I want a backstab, I want a backstab, it's like, it's not how it works, buddy. That's an attack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well said. What about you, Judge Dan?
I am not going to be able to cite anything in the appendix to give you which die roll to pull off, I suppose, either. But, I guess I would think that backstabbing is a critical feature of the thief role. So, I would at least give a player an opportunity to do that probably in every encounter at least once. And I would certainly want to pay attention to environment. So if there was opportunities for them, they're in a room that was cluttered and there was a lot of opportunity for them to dive behind things and duck around, I would certainly give them opportunities to maybe spend an action to hide in shadows again, if that worked out. And then maybe have a second sneak attack or something like that. But if they're in something that's the equivalent of a lit basketball court, they might be able to get something off at the very start of combat if they snuck into the situation, but they're going to have a really hard time being able to hide again to reset that ability to just pop out and surprise people and get that advantage.
Very nice. What about you, Judge Forrest?
I agree. I think the players need to be aware of the environment too. If it's theater of the mind, it's not just the judge's job to do that. And I think of the jeweler. You have an environment there where it's in 3 dimensions, right? I mean, it's not just a flat grid. And so you can use that to your advantage, I think, in the theater of the mind, and you ought to, and players ought to be doing that too. It's more immersive that way, I guess. As far as Appendix N, I can recall Conan being slip roofies a couple of times without him knowing. It's not Appendix N, but Thieves' World by Robert Aspen. Those novels, man, if that doesn't make you aware of a backstab and what to do afterwards, nothing will. I mean, that's backstab city, literally. So there are some examples out there in the literature, but again, to Jeff's point, it's you're the judge, man. You're making the world. You're not trying to make us a doppelganger of another person's world. It's your world.
That's an awesome answer. What about you, Judge Joan?
I don't know that I have much to add to what's been said. I mean, I've had to limit it, to you have one backstab, and then after that, they're gonna know you're there, unless you do something like what Marc was saying is that if they specifically make their attack and then take their action to move and specifically say, okay, I'm hiding in shadows or I'm sneaking silently, and they make that roll, then on their next attack, they can, they could, make another they can use a backstab, but they're not going to be able to use a backstab if they haven't told me that they're hiding in shadows or they're sneaking silently, or if it's obvious that that it's going to be a surprise attack, and they've taken that they've taken that time to think about how to use the backstab. It's not freely something that they can do.
Nice. And I kind of feel the same about you. Like, I don't know how much I can add to it. I don't know about it from Appendix N. But yeah, going off what you and Marc were saying, if someone wants to backstab, it has to be part of the story, right? Like it has to make sense. I'm not going to let somebody just backstab like, all day. It has to depending on the lighting, depending on how many baddies there are. Like, hey, there's people coming behind you. You can't, from another room. You can't backstab right now because they can see you from a little away.
It's not like a video game where you get so many backstab charges,
Right.
And you can just spend them when you want to. It's got to make sense.
And you're
be like
spamming
Batman. Be like Batman. Strike fast, get back into the shadows, and then strike again without warning. Like you've got to like the Appendix N is good fiction, but it's written fiction and it's of an older style. The better stuff to look at, it would be modern film. Look at some of the Batman films. Look at something like Pitch Black. Any movie where you've got like a lone hero taking out dozens of guys. I mean, the John Wick movies are, you could argue that some of the gunplay is essentially a bunch of backstabs because it's, ducking behind cover, using that to your advantage. Don't be bogged down by being kowtowing to Appendix N. If you're looking for backstabs, you need to find the right kind of source material. And I think you're going to be better off with visual media than you are written media.
That's an awesome answer. And yeah, you're right. There are so many films where you could completely, take inspiration from that. Absolutely.
But even the classics like Lankmar, I mean, the Thieves Guild was always behind something. They were hiding all the time. That was what made Lankmar so terrifying, is you don't know where things are coming from. But that's the whole point, is they're doing it from the shadows.
Absolutely. Nice. Thank you for the question there. And let's see. Okay, so we all have experience judging, right? So from the time that you started judging to the time to now, what have you learned over time? What's some things you're different, some things you're doing better? And I'll actually start this one.
Real quick, Hector, just to clarify, do you mean judging DCC, or are you talking about even from like when we first started like DMing D&D back in the day?
I kind of meant DCC, but if you want to go back to DMing from other editions, yeah, that's fine.
All right,
that's fine. I'll go with DCC because that's mostly all I've judged. I've been a player in other games. I've definitely gotten a lot better at improving and really letting the players tell more of the story. I think that's one of the things I've gotten better at. And it's a lot of fun because if you do something with your adventure and you have it set this one way, like, okay, they have to get this MacGuffin in X amount of time and in this certain room, like a lot of times it's going to go off the rails because your players are going to want to do something else. So I like to kind of sit back and let the players, dictate. Of course, you want a blueprint, right? Like you want to be able to, have some type of direction. But yeah, loosey goosey, baby. That's kind of what I've learned. So, and with that, let's go with Judge Jeff. What do you think?
I mean, this is going to sound a little cliche, but it's this whole idea of like prepping less. I do find that that is something that I really struggled with as an early game master. There's this anxiety of like, I'm not going to know what to do when the player does this other thing unless I've prepared for it. So I have to over prepare to somehow avoid that anxiety. But in doing that, like, yes, it succeeds in helping me avoid some anxiety, but then it also makes it so that I have to put in so damn much work to like actually get a session going that like it was really easy to get like DM burnout. And I know it takes a little bit of experience and confidence to like trust yourself enough to just like run a game with having almost nothing prepared or literally nothing prepared. But once you do it, it is so freeing. And, and there's a lot of times where it's like your players are not going to know 90% of the time what things you had prepared for, what things came from a module, and what things you were just making up on the spot. And if you don't really know how something should work out, then maybe just real quick say, oh, hold on a second, I need to look something up. And then write down 4 things that might happen and then roll a D4. like there are so many ways that you can like figure this stuff out. But yeah, that's kind of I think my personal biggest growth area has been around that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. What about you, Judge Dan?
I think I'm gonna second or third at this point the fast and loose motive, where DCC's rule set are so simple in my experience, based on certain other systems, I would say. They're that you can really wing it a lot of the time, and I really think that the system and the content really lends itself to a lot of spontaneity and just kind of seat of your pants gameplay. A lot of the adventures that I've written, I literally just throw down a city map of New York and turn animals loose in it and see what happens, and that's literally like an adventure that I've written. As characters develop, if you do have characters that you routinely play, or players that you routinely play with the same characters, as those characters develop, I really like to let those kind of drive the story rather than the plot of the adventure. I mean, within the adventure still gets completed at some point or they all die, but as those characters develop, I really like to encourage the character-based gameplay and the drive. What do these specific characters want out of this adventure? Why are they here? And and a lot of time, a lot of fun can be had from that.
I completely agree. I've totally done almost all of that. Let's go with Judge Joan. What have you learned?
What have I? Oh, wow. Well, I've learned that running RPGs isn't anything satanic. Okay.
I'm doing it wrong.
Oh, yeah. No, you're building a story. And when I started running DCC, I didn't know how to put a story together. I grabbed the modules, and to me, it had to be played like the Bible. You had to follow every area, and studying a module drove me nuts because there's no organization to a module. And looking at the map, which way, upside down, backwards, whatever. But what I've learned is that the written material, the modules that we get are wonderful from Goodman Games and from third-party publishers. And I'm learning this also as I'm writing a module, that there's no order to it. And when that person picks up the module and they read an outline of a story that it doesn't necessarily flow. It is, you've got the ideas there, you present it to your players, and the players take the information that you give them and they decide, where it goes. And that I learned I needed to relax a little more behind that GM screen, and have fun, because I was just going, going, they're not following the story. But I didn't want to railroad, and so that's what I've learned, is that, you've got a skeleton, or you have a great story there that the writer has given you. And how do you bring that about? But if you miss some stuff in there, it's only playable again, or you add it, you bring it about in a different way.
Very nice. Very nice. Let's go with Judge Forrest.
Okay, so I'll try to keep this short. It's gonna be hard. I get great anxiety when I run games. I am a much better player than a judge, because it scares me sometimes, frankly. I've learned something specific to DCC that I've learned is that you go with a swing. The game is really swingy, and if you just go with it, let the dice roll and let them fall where they may, you don't have to have the outline, to Joan's point. You don't have to worry about following the plot, because there is none. And the swinginess of DCC itself will take care of the plot. It will make the plot for you as you go along. I think that also that we often think when we're judging that we need to talk a lot, but I think more importantly is you need to listen. You need to listen to your players because they will come up with just the craziest stuff that you did not expect. I think, Dan, were you in my Umerica game a couple years back? You had the guy with a laser gun or something like that. Anyway, I seem to recall you were in there, and your character did something absolutely ludicrous, and it totally it totally threw what I had planned. I was like, okay, all right, we're done with that. We're moving on to this other thing. And I know I've done that to Marc a few times too. Also, I think letting the environment breathe, and I'll give you a specific example, not from DCC. Jeff and Marc both, I ran a late night game for them at GaryCon one year for Delta Green. And Jeff's smiling. I know why. Lipstick. And the premise of the game is there really was not a lot of action. In fact, there's almost none. But that was the whole point of the adventure. Was it's eerie because there's not action where you expect it. And so the players then are playing mind games with themselves and with each other. And all you have to do is just kind of feed them the information. Things are really quiet, shouldn't be this quiet. And then they generate the game themselves. And I don't know if these guys had fun. I had a blast running it. But it was more because of them. And Jen Brinkman was in on this game too, and she, played it up very well. They were generating most of the game. I had a 1-page outline, if it was even that. But they generated that, and it was out of their heads. And so I just had to listen a lot, give a few explanations here and there of what they see, and then I'd listen a lot. And then that's how the game played out. And I think when you get to that point, your anxiety, if you have it like I do, kind of floods away because you're with friends, right? And you're in a comfortable environment where you're letting the game happen. You're not making it happen, you're letting it happen. And that's been a huge difference for me.
That's great. I think I was in that game with Dan. If it was early, with the one with the missiles.
I think you were. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was at that game.
That's right.
And the crystal cow.
That's right. Yes.
Nice
game. Yes.
The drug taking crystal cow.
Yes, the mushroom eating. Yes.
Everybody loves that pre-gen.
That was pretty great.
Me. Yep.
That's right. Marc
we killed a lot.
That's right.
Killed a lot. Yeah.
And speaking of, how about you, Judge Marc?
So I'm going to echo a bunch of things that have already been said, but and this comes from both gaming going all the way back, but also DCC. Embrace the chaos, right? Like I roll the dice in the open. I don't. At cons, I'll have a GM screen for the reference material, not because I want to hide anything behind it. I roll open on the table. If a 1 comes up, okay. If a 20 comes up, like them's the breaks. I don't pull punches and I don't fudge numbers. And vice versa. When you're 30 minutes into the game and somebody decides to spellburn the crap out of something and like nuke your entire plan, well, you've still got 3.5 hours to go. You better find a way to do it. So you learn to embrace that chaos. And Forrest said something, you got to listen. You have to pay attention to what the players are saying, because A, they're telling you what they want to do, but also B, they're telling you the stuff that they don't know they're telling you. They'll make comments about something that like, oh God, I hope it isn't this. It is now.
You're like, no, it's now.
It wasn't before, exactly. But it is now. And if you just open your ears and listen, you can use what they're doing against them to a certain extent. I mean, that makes it sound adversarial, but that's not the point. The point is that they will feed you the stuff that you can then regurgitate back to them later. And if it's If you do it in a way that defies their expectations, they're delighted. If you do it in a way that met their expectations, they're like, aha, I was right. And they're still delighted. You cannot lose. So I think the biggest lesson is listen to the players and then embrace that chaos and just run with whatever's going on. Don't worry about the small stuff.
1,000,000%. I completely agree with all of that.
Right.
Absolutely. So it looks like we have some questions. We might not be able to get to all the questions. I'm sorry.
no.
It looks like we're getting a little shorter on time, so we'll try to make this fast.
Lightning round.
Lightning round. Yes, as Jeff would say. Cool. Okay, so looks like Trusty Sword asks, did certain systems teach you certain skills? And why don't we go with Judge Dan?
Since I'm making all the faces, thinking really hard. I guess 4th edition told me not to bother with tedium and move on. There we go.
Hey, what about you, Judge Forrest?
Call of Cthulhu has been hugely influential on me, and I think it's in terms of making players think. That role playing is a thinking exercise, and so if you can make people think, they're going to be more engaged.
Awesome. How about you, Judge Joan?
I only have 3 systems maybe that I mean I know 3.0, 3.5 not all that well. DCC is basically the system I know. What I'm learning, it's not all in the dice rolls. I mean, the initial when I started playing DCC, it felt like it was all in the dice rolls. We wanted to roll dice. Let's roll dice. Let's do this. What roll do I need to make? And with DCC, I'm learning that it's just what Dan is saying is, it's story. It's in the story. It's not in the dice rolls. Yes, some of those dice rolls, when you roll a fumble, I think in the last game that I was running prior to DCC College, I think what my players told me at the end of that was they had the most fun when someone rolled a 1. That was the highlight of the game, was when someone rolled a 1. Yeah, we had 20s rolled, and those crits happened, but what made the story was those 1s.
Good point.
And that added to the story, because that's when I heard embellishment of what happened, yeah.
Awesome. How about you, Judge Jeff?
Yeah, I definitely second what Dan was saying about how we can also learn from the bad examples. And it was really when 4th edition came along that I'm just like, tabletop skirmishes can totally be fun. I'm not claiming I didn't have a blast like doing tabletop skirmishes, but it wasn't scratching the itch of what I was really what I was going to RPGs for. But I will also say that around that time when I was like, okay, this isn't working for me, I need to find something new. And I started like dipping my toes into the OSR, and I discovered DCC RPG. At the same time, I was also exploring things like Dungeon World and things like that. And I will say that one thing that Dungeon World really gave me is this idea of draw maps, leave blanks. And it's like, I remember when I first read that, like it really kind of rocked my mind. I'm like, I'm supposed to prepare like a dungeon that like just has entire areas that I haven't mapped out yet. Like that doesn't make any sense. But like, I really tried to like take that idea and run with it. So I've got to say, like the whole Dungeon World, draw maps, leave blanks, I was very foundational on kind of the game where I've become since.
Nice.
How about you, Judge Marc?
Well, I mean, I've played a ton of systems, so the short answer is just yes. But specifically, Cypher System and DCC both have told me there is no such thing as breaking an encounter. In Cypher system, you have ciphers. They are one-off things that are often ridiculously powerful and can totally break an quote unquote break an encounter. But really all that is either you skip past something that otherwise would have been tedious, or you just got something very interesting that happened that you can then play with. In the DCC version is really high results on spell checks, or crazy criticals. When your wizard decides to nuke the bad guy by spell burning 10 points and throwing it into a magic missile that he then rolls a natural 20 on, like, okay, I guess that encounter is done, move on. Like it brings an excitement, and it's memorable to the players. The things that people remember are rolling a 20 and rolling a 1. People do not remember that time I rolled a 12. Does not happen.
Yeah, right.
And that's why I don't like bell curve systems, because they suppress the fun zones. You want the fun zones to be the big part. So that's my thing is look for those moments of awesome and figure out how to get more of them. Whether that's by expanding your crit range and your fumble range, or by giving players awesome power that comes in a single-use device, because they will spend it and then they won't have it anymore, but it'll be awesome when they spend it.
I would love to quickly build on something Marc said, because when Marc said Cypher system, that also reminded me that, back before I had kind of made this transition, for me, fun as a player involved a 3-hour care gen session, and then like writing up a 3 to 5 page essay of my backstory. And like one thing that Dungeon Crawl Classics really taught me with the 0 level funnel, and the Cypher system taught me with the your character is a blank who blanks. That is how you create your character. You fill in those 3 blanks. Like, I have discovered that, my God, like having a really simple care gen process that gives you something like really bite-sized and flavorful is, for me, so much more fun and so much more impactful than anything that I can come up with in a 3-hour care gen session, followed by, my little self-assigned essay.
That's great. That's awesome. I'm going to go off of what Marc said about the fun zone. I think DCC really taught me that there's a lot of fun zone in the system that I haven't seen in other ones, especially the crazy spell burns. And I know at cons, people, Jeff will, burn themselves to oblivion, and everything. I do it too.
That's the flame behind him right now.
But I do love it for that. And one thing that I've learned off of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle and Other Strangeness system is you can spend, there you go. You can spend like 2 hours making a character and it will die in 10 minutes. But it was still fun. I made a mole man, but unfortunately I had one encounter, he got shot. So
that mole trap just did him in. Yeah,
exactly. So thank you for the question there, Trusty Sword. Let's go to one more question. Let's see. From Marc CMG asks, what is your favorite RPG book from 20 or more years ago and why? Thanks. Let's go with Judge Jeff.
Right here, I have the Treasury of Archaic Names.
Ooh.
And it's funny because it's literally sitting right beside me, because I have it all the time. I have it reachable at all moments. It is an old Judges Guild product. Because of the current state of Judges Guild, I would encourage you to go onto eBay and buy a used copy of this, rather than buying current PDFs of it. But that said, this book is fantastic. And you get such ridiculously amazing and flavorful names from this thing that I find so fun and so inspiring. Some of the names that I have randomly generated that I'm using in some of my current games. For example, in my weekly D&D game I'm running, we've got a pornographic Finnegan. That's right out of here. We've got Cyrilius Carnpack is a great name. That's our vampire, Cyrilius Carnpack.
Nice.
Eldred the Unpolished, Dongle the Debased, Magda Strike, just like so many good names. And like,
Nice.
I don't know, I love it. I love this little booklet. The Treasury of Archaic Names.
Beautiful.
I love that. That's awesome. How about you, Judge Forrest?
So I'll wax a little bit nostalgic. For me, it's the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons official coloring album.
Ooh.
That was the first D&D book I ever picked up, and it's got a solo game in it with a dungeon, a ridiculous dungeon where it's like you turn one corner, there's a beholder, and then another corner, and there's 3 skeletons. And yeah, anyway, it's absolutely gonzo. I would love to see somebody DCC if I had run it someday. Oh my goodness, it would be a TPK probably in 2 rooms. But it's stripped down. It's simple. It's straightforward. It's if you wanted to just, I mean, I was 9 years old when I picked it up, right? And that's how I started to learn to role play.
Nice.
Was this simple game. So the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons coloring album. It is way out of print. I have a copy that found my son got it for me at some point. They're not cheap, but if you can find one, and the artwork is amazing. It's amazing. So anyway, good stuff.
That's great. What about you, Judge Dan?
I'll just hold this up again. Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. That was my jam from like 7th grade on for many a year. A lot of really fun campaigns and adventures, and just sitting at my home in my room by myself, rolling up characters for hours and hours on end. You know, all that good stuff. Definitely a soft spot in my heart at a very special time, you know, in my life. So enough to the point where, you know, I made another role playing game based on it. So what can I say? So there you go.
That's awesome. I had a feeling you were going to say that one.
Yeah.
That's a great one though. I do love that book.
Yep.
How about you, Judge Marc?
So Dan took my answer, but realistically, so I don't know if this is going to show up. Transdimensional Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Ooh.
Yes.
It's a time travel and dimension hopping source book for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. And it is probably my favorite of all the Palladium books out of that line, because it has a really fun time travel mechanic, like totally different than anything I've seen in other places. And it lets you play mutant dinosaurs.
Oh yeah.
How can you not love that?
Yes, I completely agree. Let's see, Judge Joan, how about you?
Well, since I was really only introduced to playing in RPGs back in the early 2010s, I really don't have a book that is 20 years old, an RPG book that I've really used that's 20 years old. I do have, I've collected some of the first D&D books, so I do have the first printing of the Monster Manual and some AD&D books, but I really haven't had a chance to really, delve into them because there's so much good Goodman Games stuff, and DCC stuff, and that's not 20 years old at this point.
In time,
it's coming.
It's coming. That's okay, because we're here for DCC love anyway. I will quickly say that mine was Isle of Dread.
Yeah.
I loved that one. I didn't really know how to run D&D or anything, but I would look through the book and make characters and just look at all the stats of all the creatures and the dinosaurs. Oh my gosh. And look at the maps and pretend, like me and my friends would pretend like we would just go exploring and stuff would happen. And, like I said, we didn't know the rules, but it was just fantastic. It was so fun.
Even if you know the rules though, that's not an easy one to run. That's not a beginning level module, I don't think, to run anyway.
Gotcha. So let's see, that might be all of the questions that we had from our chat, I believe.
Nice.
So that wraps up really nicely. So I want to thank all of you for watching the DCC College or DCCCC Community College.
At BCC.
I am so thank you all of you, all of the great judges for joining me. Seriously, I really appreciate this. It was my honor, my privilege to be here. I hope all of you have fun, like running your games. I hope you learned something. And with that, I think we're off. The judge is always right.
Yo. Yeah, thanks Hector for putting it together, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Really
Hector.
appreciated
It's
it.
good to see you guys.
All right.